Today, one of the products I've been looking forward to most of all this year, GIMP 3.0. I'm telling you people, this could be the one. GIMP 3.0 not only holds up to that paragon of image editing Photoshop, but in 3 ways it does us better. First, GIMP 3.0 is almost entirely penalty-free. You can apply color adjustments and even filters non-destructively without the need for a smart object. Second, we now have dynamic drop shadows, glows, and bevels that sometimes outshine their Photoshop equivalents. And third, GIMP is as ever totally free, as in run, copy, distribute, modify as much as you want. Like there's no reason not to at least download it, right? 2 things up front. First of all, if only for the sake of continuity, I'll be working in a very simple composition that I showed how to create in my previous GIMP video, which was on version 2.10, by the way. It's not essential you watch it. However, if you're new to GIMP, it does help to set the scene. Secondly, I will be referring multiple times in this video to Adobe Photoshop. I know that doesn't go over with a few of you, but here's the thing. It's a simple fact. Photoshop is by far and away the most popular image editor on the planet, and there's lots of folks who want to transition from Photoshop, which costs like, $100,000 a month, to GIMP, which is free for all time. Speaking of Photoshop and that software, we have these things called adjustment layers, and they are independent layers of color adjustment that affect all the layers below them. They are entirely dynamic, which is true for color adjustments these days in GIMP 3.0 as well. However, in the case of GIMP, they affect one layer at a time. So I'll go ahead and select the layer that contains this woman right here, who comes to us from the Dreamstime image library, and then I'll go up to the colors menu. So what I want you to know, a lot of GIMP looks the same as it ever did. There are no new tools. There's just a smattering of new commands. However, everything, even familiar commands from the colors and filters menu, are now dynamic. And so I'll go to colors and I'll choose shadows, highlights, and we have a very packed dialog box. I know this puts off a lot of people who are used to Adobe products, they tend to be a little more elegant. They have design teams and so forth. But even though these things are tightly packed, they are well described as well. We have great tooltips. Notice, adjust exposure of shadows, adjust saturation of shadows. It could not be more clear. And what I love about these is every one of them is a labor of love because they are written by the people who actually designed the feature. Every tooltip at Adobe it's written by the marketing team. And I got news for you. They know the feature as well as you do. So there's not going to be anything in that tooltip that's going to help you. That's my experience anyway. I'm going to grab this shadows value and drag it up and make it brighter so that we have more detail in the hair. Isn't that great? And then I'll take the highlights value down. So very simple modification, just so we have a faux HDR effect. And then I'll click OK. That's all there is to it. And notice now inside the layers panel, we have this new column right here, FX, that shows you all the dynamic effects that you apply to a layer. So I'll click on FX. They're called layer effects here, and we'll see shadows, highlights. Now I can turn it off in order to see a before version of an image, and then on to see the after version. I can click this guy to edit the selected filter, or I can just go ahead and double click on it. Works like a charm. And if you're enjoying this so far, by the way, won't you take a moment to subscribe? I have so much more waiting in the future. All right, now I can modify my settings. So I could just drag this shadow slider here. So just dragging inside this area acts as a kind of slider bar. And then I could change the highlights to taste as well, and then click OK. So entirely non-destructive. I want to show you one more thing. These don't exist in Photoshop, not Photoshop proper. Split view. And so this allows you to see before and after. You got to be careful though. Oopsie, I missed it. You got to drag that vertical line. It's easy to miss. And then everything on the right of the line is before and everything to the left is after. After which point I'll click OK, and that applies it, of course, to the entire layer. Now, you may know if you work inside Photoshop that where color adjustments are concerned, every adjustment layer gets its own mask. However, if you're working with dynamic filtering effects, of which I should say shadows, highlights is one of them. Even though it's grouped with the adjustments, it's actually a filter in Photoshop. And so you would, if you want to apply it dynamically, you'd have to take a moment to create a smart object, which balloons the file size not true inside this software. It's lean and mean. Everything just takes a few K. And by the way, all your smart filters are governed by a single filter mask, whereas here you can mask each effect independently. So I'll go ahead and select my rectangle select tool. Now this is a very gimpy thing I'm about to show you, meaning not so great. I'm going to click on the rectangle select tool, but it didn't take. Notice it's not really selected. None of the tools are selected. So if I click, I'm thinking I'm going to drag to create a rectangle, right? I bring up the shadows, highlights, dialog box, and it's going to apply another effect. And that's because I'm still inside this effect mode, which is flat out bizarre. By the way, cancel out. And now really make sure I've selected the tool by firmly clicking on it. And then now I can go ahead and drag in order to draw a marquee. Love these things, by the way. This is not, I mean, in case you're like, Deke, you're talking about whether the software is nicely designed or not, and you're not creating a nicely designed image. Yeah, that's because I'm demoing things. I want you to see what's going on. So I'll just go ahead and select this rectangular area, go to colors, and choose a command that doesn't even exist inside Photoshop, color temperature. And that will bring up what is really actually a very simple dialog box. What we're going to do is balance the colors. I'm going to cool down the selected region right here. Original temperature just tells you you're just setting a arbitrary base temperature, by the way, in degrees Kelvin for what it's worth. Sounds technical, but it's not really that big a deal. And then intended temperature is going to make a difference. Now, I want you to notice the cursor. That's why I'm showing you this. Cursors inside this program are generally really tiny. So tiny that it's easy to lose them. But once you get used to working with them, they're great because they're not intrusive. They don't get in your way. And you can just wiggle the mouse, to find where the cursor is. Whereas this new thing, GTK3, the graphical toolkit that GNU is pretty proud of, has these just ridiculous big hand cursors inside the dialog boxes. I like to think of it as the gauntlet of Thanos, I'm sorry. And it's just so dumb because it looks like my ginormous hand is over intended temperature. But if I start dragging, I change the original temperature, which does nothing. Watch the screen. I'm not doing, I am doing something. Oh, that's right, because it's mapping to the new value. But that's not what I want. I want to leave that alone. Actually, that's good enough. It doesn't matter. You're just setting a base. What you want to do is drag intended temperature. So you want to pay attention to the tip of the middle finger. I never thought I would recommend that in any piece of software in my life in front of a general audience. Really, I don't even think my mother would be proud that I'm saying this, but watch the tip of the middle finger as you drag these values around. And so I'm going to take this value down, which cools off the image really nicely inside that selected region. So that's great that you can do that. But here's the curious fact. Oh, hey, real quick. In case anyone is thinking, is Deke done with Adobe? No, Deke is not. I'm Deke, by the way. Le Poisson Deke. And I'll be appearing at the Illustrator Virtual Summit, online of course, from May 20th to 23rd of this year, 2025. Yeah, so just a few weeks from now. And not just me, Brian Wood, Tony Harmer, Kara Pichinich, Von Glitchka, the list goes on. It's totally free, so sign up today. And of course, there's a VIP. You didn't know there's a VIP? Oh, there's totally a VIP, which includes me doing a full-on beginner's level mini course and much, much more. Again, that's Illustrator Virtual Summit, 4 full days. It's like a vector palooza. You're gonna love it. But here's the curious fact. We're done with the selection, so I'll deselect the image. I want to show you now, if I click FX, I'm seeing both color temperature and shadows highlights, so I can edit either one of them, but what am I not seeing? I'm not seeing the mask that I just assigned to color temperature, and that's not something you get to see. So that is a static modification. That's a static part of this otherwise dynamic modification. So if you don't like it, you'd have to delete this, color temperature modification and try again. Anyway, I'll just leave it there. And I want to show you one more thing. I'm going to go up to colors and brightness contrast. Now, those of you, this will just be a moment of chuckling. I think many of you know, if you've been with Photoshop for years and years, you know that there used to be a very bad version of brightness contrast. So now there's a much better one. It's been around for like 15 years, and it has a little use legacy checkbox to make it worse. This is the legacy version right here. And so if I increase the brightness value, why would anybody want that? Why haven't they fixed this? I don't understand. It was always, everybody hated it in Photoshop. You're going to hate it in GIMP too. Anyway, I'm going to take the brightness value way down for the sake of demonstration. You'll see why in just a moment. But I will just mock the software some more and show you that contrast just clips colors all over the place, and taking it down turns the image into an unsightly gray ghost. So, hey, who'd want to do that? Nobody. Anyway, I want you to see this. So you can kind of bump up your color adjustments. So you can bump brightness contrast up to levels, and you can take levels and bump it up to curves. Kind of cool. So I'll change this to levels watcher though. It doesn't, it's not accurate. All right, whatever. I don't care. That's not what this is about. I'll click OK. So enough mockery. Now I want to show you something. Click FX. Notice that each of these options is heaped on top of the last one. So they're applied in the order that you apply them. So from bottom to top. But you can change the order if you want to by clicking on levels, for example, and clicking this down arrowhead, and then watch it change. Do you see that? It's not a big change, but still, this changes the order of the sequence of the event. So you can do that if you like to, which is great. I don't want levels because it looks like, garbage. So I'll get rid of it by clicking on that little X, and everything looks fresh as a daisy. All right, now for something that's going to blow your mind. At least it blew mine. And so I'm going to select this background image right here, also from Dreams Time, with these kind of bokeh circles going on here. And I'll go to filters. Anything under filters, generally speaking, is available as a dynamic effect. I'll go to blur. Let's have some fun and apply zoom motion blur. Radial blur and zooming inside, Photoshop. Watch this. You choose this, and it automatically previews in the canvas. Like, there's no reason it shouldn't do that. In case you're like, what are you talking about, dude? Here I am looking at the equivalent feature in Photoshop. It's radial blur. I've set it to zoom. I cranked up the amount value. We don't see it apply dynamically on the fly, that is to say. And then this is my center setting right here. This absolutely from the dark ages of Photoshop. Some, 1890, something like that. Whereas here in GIMP, we've had what we've been wanting to have in Photoshop forever. I think I've been wanting it. You can just click on this little arrow right here, which represents the center point. So you can manually adjust the settings if you want to, but click on this guy and just click. And that sets the center at a different location. And click right here to set it. It's so awesome. Let me know. I could do this all day. If you want me to record a 24-hour video of me just sitting here clicking at different spots while applying zoom motion blur inside GIMP, I will happily do it. Anyway, all kinds of different things you can change. I'll click OK. And now we have an FX associated with that layer. So each layer has its own collection of effects. Let's go back to the woman for a second so I can show you a typical sharpening scenario. Let's say I'll return to filters, choose enhance, and then choose sharpen unsharp mask, which works pretty much the same way it does inside of Photoshop. We have the same three options: radius, amount, and threshold. Radius, I'm going to crank up. This is not going to be a good looking effect. This is for the sake of demonstration once again, because I want to show you how to solve a problem. And I'm going to crank up amount too. So it just looks absolutely hideous. I don't know if we need that much hideousness. Let's back things off a little bit. But this gives you a sense of what's going on. Amount is measured as a decimal value. So if you're thinking in terms of percentage, this would be 288.8%. So just multiply it times 100. Anyway, click OK to accept that change. And I'm going to zoom in. And this is using a technique. I really appreciate all the comments that I got in my previous GIMP video. I just love them. And about 100 of you, I'm not joking this time or exaggerating, told me that you can zoom in the software. The best way to zoom is to press the control key and use the scroll wheel on the mouse. So I'm on Windows, by the way. I imagine that's Command on the Mac. I don't know. Anyway, that's a great technique. Thank you very much. And you can see that we're creating halos around the rectangular area. And I'm not only sharpening the detail inside the image, in this case, because the radius value is so high, this is more along the lines of clarity, but I'm also affecting the color detail. You can see our eyes are turning really blue. We have all kinds of orange stuff and weird colors around her face. And so what I would need to do if I were working in Photoshop, I'd have to apply those blend options, which is a totally different setting, totally different dialog box. Here, it's one-stop shopping. You click on FX, double-click on Sharpen, on Sharp Mask, and then there's the blend mode right there. So you click on it. Replace is just replacing one group of pixels with another. It's a lot like normal. But what I want, and I've got to scroll down this very long list of blend modes. Yes, congratulations to GIMP for having so many blend modes, and down here at the bottom is luminous. That's what I want. Did you see the difference in her face? We're no longer sharpening all that color detail, and now of course this is way over sharpened, so I could change my settings if I wanted to, or I could just take this opacity value down, taking care of course to make sure that you're watching the tip of the middle finger, at which point I'll click OK. And now we'll go and zoom out a little bit, and I'll press Shift J in order to center the image on screen. Now let's take a look at working with text. And so I'll go ahead and select this live text layer. So in other words, it's editable type. And I could show you how things have improved dramatically where this is concerned, by the way, inside GIMP. But instead, I'm going to focus on the layer effects, the equivalent of layer effects inside this program. So you can actually select the type and outline it. It's not very satisfactory. You can't change where the outline rests in terms of having the fill on top of the outline. You can look into that yourselves. But I'm going to go up here to filters, and I want you to see that you have this thing called generic right here, and then text styling. So you can try that if you want to. In my opinion, it's trying to pull off too much inside of a single dialog box. It's just chaos. You can work with it if you like. But anyway, and then it will be dynamic. So I'm going to cancel out, however. The way I prefer to approach things is to go to filters and go to this guy right here, light and shadow. And I was telling you, there's not many new commands inside the software, but these guys are new, bevel and inner glow. And then we have drop shadow. Now, why? You may look at this, especially if you're a Photoshop person, you may look at this and go, well, why'd they choose drop shadow and inner glow? Bevel I get, but I mean, where's inner shadow and where's outer glow? For Pete's sake. Well, that's because this is much more flexible the way they've arranged it inside GIMP. And so a shadow can be a glow and a glow can be a shadow is the idea. It's just one is directional, right? So glows go outward in all directions, whereas the shadow goes down into the left or something like that, whatever direction you like. And so anyway, I'll just go ahead and show you. I'll apply inner glow, and you'll see that it's going to look like, in just a moment here, I'll change the settings a little bit here. It's going to look like an inner shadow, right? Because I set it at a direction. I just changed the X and Y values. They're linked together by default. You can unlink them if you like. And notice that we're leaving out the fill color, which was white. If you want to bring it back, then you change the mode here to a different mode, such as multiply is going to work. And that will go ahead and multiply the shadow into the letters, which works beautifully. This is a disappointment with drop shadows, as I'm about to show you. I'll go ahead and click OK, just so we can see that. Now let's do the equivalent, but let's now set it outside of the letters instead of inside. So I'll go to filters, and I'll choose light and shadow, and I'll choose this guy right here, drop shadow, and it can be a glow. If you just set the X and Y values to 0, you'll get a glow effect instead. But I am going to, the blur radius is a little high, so I might take it down a little so we have a crisper shadow. But I'm also going to move it out. Oh, I know what I want to do. No, the opacity value is already cranked up to 100%, so we should be able to see it okay. Here's the thing, though. What if, no, that's the wrong opacity value. This is the one I want. We got two opacity values. I'll go ahead and take this up to closer to 100, just so that we're really seeing what's going on here. And what I'd like to be able to do is not only create black shadows. That's rinky-dink stuff. I just got to say, you want to create a shadow that's either, a complementary color or something along those lines, or a color that goes with the image. So I'll click right there and I will change it to purple. Why not? And it previews on the fly. That's great. Click OK in order to accept that change. But obviously it's not, it's just replacing the colors in the image, especially if I crank the opacity all the way up to 100% with my middle finger. There you can see that we're just covering up the stuff in the background. What I should be able to do, this, I would characterize this as a bug or just a flagrant omission. If you change it to multiply, it just goes away. And so far as I can tell, the problem here is that it's not able to calculate blend modes outside the confines of the layer. So there goes that. So you just got to change it back to normal, or you could do dissolve. Dissolve works. It's just, not something you'd ever want to apply in a million years. But anyway, I'll change it to normal and that works. But what that does mean, there's only one color that's going to darken everything behind it, and that's black. So you'd have to go with that instead. All right, anyway, I'll click OK. I'm going to click on FX right there, and I'm going to turn off the inner glow, which is also an inner shadow. And I just want to show you bevel really fast. And so I'll go up to filters, choose light and shadow, and choose this guy right here, bevel. And I'm going to make quick work of it. I just want you to know bump is a lot like smooth inside Photoshop, and chamfer is a lot like those chisel hard soft things. So I'll go with chamfer. And then you can set the depth and everything to whatever you want it to be. Absolutely. Click OK. I'm just going to accept these defaults for now. And the text remains editable, by the way. So if I wanted to change the font or the color or the type size or anything, I'll just change the color to, let's say, a shade of, I don't know, pale red, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Pale purple. Why don't we do pale purple, just so that we're matching the background kind of, and I'll click OK, and everything updates. Now I want you to see something here. I'll go ahead and switch away from the type tool so I don't enter a bunch of pluses as I zoom in. And I want you to see right here that we have this kind of crazy halo effect around the drop shadow. If you see something like that, it might be a function of the order in which you applied the effect. So I'll click on FX right there. Now in Photoshop, you cannot change the order of effects. But you can't apply multiple bevels. You can in this software, but you can apply multiple like shadows and a few other things, but you can't change the order of effects. Drop shadows are always at the bottom. Bevels are always, I believe, at the top. Here, I could click the down arrow to move the bevel down. Did you see the difference? This is with bevel on top, it bevels the shadow, and this is with bevel at bottom, it doesn't. The shadow is applied afterward. That is something that you cannot do to this day in Photoshop. Now, I don't want to oversell GIMP. It doesn't offer any generative AI. You'll need a separate app such as Darktable or Raw Therapy to process raw photographs. And Photoshop is still far better than GIMP at removing backgrounds and refining masks. But what counts isn't what I think, it's what you think. So do me a favor and think below. Not to mention, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Oh, and hey, if you start working in GIMP and you think this doesn't look quite like it does in Deke's video, that's because I changed a handful of settings that, in my opinion, make all the difference in the world. To see how I made myself as an experienced designer feel at home inside GIMP 3.0, join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DekeNow. And then go to Deke.com and sign up for my newsletter. Like GIMP, it is gratis and Libre. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deke Now.